The cafe was nearly empty, except for the muffled sound of cups being stacked behind the counter and the soft whisper of instrumental music looping in the background. In the farthest corner, next to a window fogged up by the light rain falling outside, she sat. Her fingers touched the rim of the warm mug, not out of thirst, but as a way to anchor herself in the present. This was where she used to meet him, every Friday, for 2 years. Now she sat alone, watching the raindrops slide down the glass like time was crying in her place. Outside, the city remained alive. Cars crossed rain-soaked avenues. People rushed by with umbrellas in hand, trying to escape the cold wind that sliced through the sidewalks. But inside, everything felt suspended, as if the air had grown heavier, as if the past still hovered over every chair, every reflection in the glass, every faded detail in the wallpaper. The empty chair in front of her hurt more than any word he had ever said. Because sometimes, silence weighs more than a scream. She had met him on an ordinary night, in a dimly lit supermarket between shelves of canned goods. He smiled. She didn't. Even so, something about that awkward smile made her pause her mental to-do list for just a second. The conversation started there, and then it continued through messages exchanged more often than they probably should have been, until the meetups became routine, and the routine became comfort, or so she thought. The first signs of anxiety were mistaken for passion, the racing heart, the butterflies, the loss of appetite before seeing him. It all felt like being in love. But over time, the butterflies didn't leave. They grew. They became a constant tightness, an invisible alarm her body sent before her mind could understand. She began sleeping less, smiling less, hesitating before replying to texts, always calculating every word as if speaking to a judge, not a partner. The argument started like tiny cracks, barely noticeable, a biting comment disguised as a joke, hours of unexplained absence, a look that felt heavier than it should have. And even then, she justified it. He had a tough day. He's just intense. Maybe I'm overreacting. Until doubt became a habit, and the habit, a prison. The moment she realized she was emotionally drained was painfully simple. A Monday morning, squeezed between the phone alarm and the smell of burnt coffee. She looked at her phone and felt her stomach turn just from seeing his name on the screen. It wasn't longing, it was fear. One small notification was enough to throw off her entire day. And in that moment, she understood. Her peace was gone. Friends had tried to warn her, some with subtle hints, others with blunt honesty. But like someone shielding an open wound from the light, she avoided exposing the relationship. Love sometimes is a distorted lens on reality. And when you love out of need, blindness becomes comfortable. It was during a solo trip that something finally broke. She was in Charleston, staying in an old Airbnb that smelled of damp wood and had creaky furniture. She walked along cobblestone streets, feeling the salty breeze from the ocean and the distant sound of a saxophone echoing from a balcony. There, for the first time in a long time, she took a deep breath without feeling that weight on her chest. The freedom was subtle, but unmistakable. No messages waiting for replies, no unspoken questions hanging in the air, just her and the world. When she returned, he was waiting with promises of change, tears in his eyes, and a bouquet of apologies that had already wilted before being handed over. But she was different. Not on the outside. She still wore the same worn-out coat and had the same eyes always searching for something invisible. The change was internal, silent, and irreversible. She had found herself again in that oceanside silence, and she no longer intended to lose herself for someone who turned love into obligation. The breakup was harder on him than it was on her, because he didn't see it coming, because he never noticed that she had been falling apart inside, because men who cause anxiety don't listen to silence. They only react to screams. In the months that followed, she relearned how to be alone. and it was precisely in that emptiness that she found peace. Her days were no longer minefields. They became quiet trails. She rediscovered abandoned hobbies, listened to music without feeling a stab in her chest, and the mirror stopped being her enemy. It was on a random Saturday between books and coffee that she met someone new. There were no instant sparks, no intense promises, just a calm look and a light conversation about Russian literature and the strange spring weather. No games, no urgency, just presence. Being with him didn't bring butterflies. It brought warmth, the kind of warmth that comes with certainty. He didn't make her laugh with forced jokes. He made her smile just by listening, attentively, without rushing. She didn't have to mentally rehearse each sentence before speaking, because she knew she wouldn't be judged. With him, she could simply be. And to be, after so long spent hiding, is the greatest form of peace. Peace made no noise. It wasn't euphoric. It wasn't an emotional roller coaster. It was quiet breakfasts, aimless walks, texts replied to with care and time. It was the absence of fear. It was knowing that if he said, "I'm here," she could believe it. She didn't post photos, didn't make public declarations, because when the soul finds rest, it doesn't feel the need to prove anything to the world. True love is invisible like breathing, but just as vital. The following fall, they returned to that same cafe. This time, the table was no longer empty. She laughed with her eyes, and he listened like someone collecting tiny details. The lights outside danced in the window reflections, and there was something sacred in that ordinary moment. If someone watched them from afar, they might not understand. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic displays, but there was peace. And peace, when it's real, is almost imperceptible to those who've never known chaos. In the end, she understood something simple yet powerful. The right person isn't the one who takes your breath away. It is the one who teaches you how to breathe. And after everything, the only question still echoing in her mind was, why did it take so long to realize that peace is also love? If this touched you, share it with someone who once confused love with a storm. Maybe it's time to remember, true love doesn't scream, doesn't demand, doesn't hurt. It soothes, it heals, it simply stays.